Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ateneo de Manila University. Please welcome your host for today, the Vice President of the Loyola Schools and Professor of Chemistry, Dr. Asunta C. Goyeg-King.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please rise for the Philippine National Anthem to be led by the Ateneo Chamber Singers. May we ask you to remain standing for the invocation to be led by Father Daniel McNamara of the Society of Jesus, Professor of Physics and Chaplain of the Ateneo Loyola Schools.
O Lord God, Creator, the presence of your creative hand has only slowly emerged into our human consciousness and appreciation. Your loving providence, always guiding to our feeble minds and hearts, is but a gentle whisper, difficult to hear amidst our noisy lives. And so today we rejoice to welcome into our community a scholar endowed with your gift of insight. It is through such people that we can hear again some of the sounds of your word as revealed in the book of nature. And so we pray. Yahweh our Lord, how magnificent is your name in all the earth. You whose splendor upon the heavens inspires song by the mouth of babes and sucklings. You founded a fort before your foes, putting to rest upstart and enemy. When I witness your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you set in place, what are mortals that you mind them, children of dust that you note them? Yet you have made them little less than divine, with glory and honor adorn them. You gave them reign over your works of your hands, to set all beneath their feet. All cattle, large and small, beasts of the wild, as well as fowl of heaven, fish of the sea, passing over the paths of the sea. Yahweh our Lord, how magnificent is your name in all the earth. And so we ask you, Lord, speak again today. Enkindle yet again the bush that burns but is not consumed. Let an awakened awe at your creation come upon us today. Thus might we respond in love to your task in your garden, which you have made ours.
The audience may now be seated. Thank you, Father Dan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ateneo de Manila University for this forum with Professor Prof Ciechanover, 2004 Nobel Laureate for Chemistry. We would also like to welcome all our viewers watching via our webcast in cooperation with our partners from Moscow. Now please welcome Father Bienvenido F. Nebres of the Society of Jesus, President of the Ateneo de Manila University, who will give the welcome remarks. Father Ben.
Professor Aaron Ciechanover, our distinguished speaker for this afternoon, Mr. Edward Go, Vice Chairman of the Ateneo Board of Trustees, and Dr. Marija Ruiz, a member of our board, Dr. Uwe Morawetz, Founding Chairman of the International Peace Foundation, and really the mover behind this series of bridges towards a culture of peace, Ambassador Alfonso Yunchenko, was been a major sponsor and promoter of this series towards a culture of peace. Secretary Alabastro, so I haven't seen her yet. Estrella Alabastro was supposed to be here, but I haven't seen her. Dr. Maria Suntakoyeg Keng, Dr. Fabian Dairit, and all of us who are gathered here, especially I'd like to welcome students who are here. In many ways, this is for you. Because it's our hope that this will inspire you to pursue a life in science and a life towards a culture of peace. We'd also like to thank, to greet Mr. Albert Moses, a Minister Counselor of the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and other members of the diplomatic corps who might be here. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this rare privilege of listening to the keynote address and having the opportunity to dialogue with a truly distinguished scientist, the 2004 Nobel Laureate for Chemistry, Professor Aaron Ciechanover. He and his topic will be more properly introduced by Dr. Fabian Dairit, Dean of the School of Science and Engineering. I'd just like to add my own welcome and thanks to Professor Ciechanover for taking the time to address us and dialogue with us, and also for spending time to get to know our country better. Professor Ciechanover was here earlier in, I think, January for the 10th Eurasia Conference on Chemical Sciences, the Philippine International Convention Center. He will also be taking time to visit various places, including the Ilocos region, which makes me especially happy since that's my home region. I mention these things because the theme of the Bridges program is towards a culture of peace, bridges towards a culture of peace. And while dialogue can be carried on many levels, one of them we call the dialogue of life, where we come together and get to know one another better, allowing us thus to transcend our limitations and differences and learn better how to truly live in peace. I thank Professor Ciechanover for the dialogue of science and ideas, which we share this afternoon. I also thank him for the dialogue of life and friendship in the time he's taking to visit our country and to come to know us better. This privileged occasion is part of the Bridges program of the International Peace Foundation. It first brought Nobel laureates to Thailand from November 2003 to April 2005. The success of this first series has led to this Bridges program towards a culture of peace in the Philippines from November last year to this month of April. We are really immensely grateful to Dr. Uwe Morawetz, the founding chairman of the International Peace Foundation, and the whole foundation for his generosity and persistence in carrying out this important initiative for world understanding and peace. This Philippine program would not be possible without the cooperation and support of many individuals and institutions. I think you have in your program the kind of chairman for the Philippine program, Mr. Jaime Augusto Sobel de Ayala and Mr. Washington Sisip, and the sponsors, which you have seen on the board, BMW and Dusit, as well as Microsoft, Ogilvy, and the Yunchenko group of companies. We'd like to thank all of them and all the university presidents, and as well as all our schools who have participated, because it is your participation that has made this possible. Next year, 2009, will mark the 150th anniversary of the Ateneo de Manila University. We are thus engaged in a time of remembering and of looking forward. And the themes in our 3-year run-up have been, for the last year, celebrating excellence. This year is deepening spirituality, and the last year is building the nation. We come together today in a celebration of excellence, for indeed the Nobel Prize is surely the highest accolade of excellence in the scientific field. We also come to renew the spirit to share our desire for dialogue and the search for our best selves towards a culture of peace. We come together in our common search for a better world and for a better life for our peoples and for all peoples. And so once more, my warmest welcome and deepest thanks to all of you, especially to Professor Ciechanover and to Dr. Morawetz and the International Peace Foundation, to the sponsors who are here, Ambassador Yurchenko in particular, who has taken the time also to be with us, for the privilege of this address and the dialogue this afternoon. Welcome again and good afternoon.
Thank you, Father Nebres. As Father Nebres said, today's event is brought to us by Bridges, Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace, facilitated by the International Peace Foundation. May I now invite Mr. Uwe Morawetz, founding chairman of the International Peace Foundation, to give us a few words.
Magandang hapon po, and welcome to the first ASEAN event series, Bridges, Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace. Bridges is facilitated by the International Peace Foundation, a non-political and non-religious foundation under the common patronage of 21 Nobel Peace Prize laureates based in Vienna. The events have been hosted in cooperation with the various local and international partners, including the country's major universities, and I would like to thank Ateneo de Manila University and its president, Father Nebres, for hosting our event today. Having started in November 2007, Bridges has been continuously held in the Philippines and Thailand, involving the participations of Nobel laureates from various fields. The first ASEAN series of Bridges is an independent contribution to the Decade for a Culture of Peace and Nonviolence, initiated and promoted by the United Nations General Assembly. It follows the Bridges series, which the International Peace Foundation has already hosted in Thailand between November 2003 and April 2005. The pluralistic program of Bridges has highlighted the International Peace Foundation's intercultural and transdisciplinary approach towards peace. The Foundation does not take sides, but acts as a mediator by creating an independent platform for dialogue where representatives of science, politics, economy, culture, religion, the media, and youth can meet, share their viewpoints, listen to each other, and find mutual ways of understanding and cooperation. Therefore, the Foundation itself is a bridge and a facilitator between different language groups in our divided societies, where politicians speak another language than artists, and business and religious leaders another one than scientists. In a highly interdependent world, problems cannot be solved by either one of these language groups only, but by finding ways of working together. After the success of its Bridges program in Thailand, the International Peace Foundation has been invited by other ASEAN countries to build further bridges towards peace and international understanding by expanding its program beyond Thailand to stimulate the intellectual, scientific, and cultural exchange in the region. The first ASEAN Bridges series has therefore continuously been held in the Philippines and Thailand since November 2007, comprising events with Nobel laureates from various fields. The Nobel laureates have visited the region not all at once, but separately, to conduct public lectures, seminars, workshops, and dialogues hosted by local institutions during the continuous period of 6 months. The aim of Bridges is to facilitate and strengthen dialogue and communication between societies in Southeast Asia with their multiple cultures and faiths, as well as with people in other parts of the world, to promote understanding and trust. The events aim at building bridges through Nobel laureates with the local universities and other institutions in Southeast Asia to establish long-term relationships which may result in common research programs or other forms of collaboration. By enhancing science, technology, and education as a basis for peace and development, the events may lead to better cooperation for the advancement of peace, freedom, and security in the region, with the active involvement of the young generation, ASEAN's key to the future. This is why Bridges has not been designed as a one-time event, but as a continuous process of synergies to make the series of events a sustainable success for the Philippines, for Thailand, and for Southeast Asia as a whole. I'm grateful to the Philippine chairman of Bridges, Mr. Jaime Augusto Zubeldia Ayala, and to our honorary chairman, Mr. Washington Sisip. Their powerful guidance paved the way for Bridges to bear fruit. I'm also grateful to the presidents of our local partner institutions who have developed the detailed schedule of the events in continuous meetings over the past months, as well as to our sponsors who have enabled us to make the idea of Bridges a reality. As the Philippine Bridges series of events comes to its close this April and will be continued in Malaysia in November 2008, I would like to say thank you to everyone present today for taking part in this program. May it help us to facilitate a new culture of peace through dialogue, transcending its definition as merely the absence of war or armed conflict into a new understanding what the basis for peace is: education. In this spirit, we welcome today the 2004 Nobel Laureate for Chemistry, Professor Prof Ciechanover, who has agreed to come to the Philippines to support the events. We all look forward to his keynote speech and to his important contribution to build bridges. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. Morawetz. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce our keynote speaker, please welcome Dr. Fabian M. Dairit, Dean of the School of Science and Engineering of the Ateneo de Manila University and the President of the Integrated Chemists of the Philippines.
Many people associate proteins with meat, muscle, or physical strength. Proteins, however, are more than just a dietary matter. Proteins perform a multitude of functions, such as the catalysis of biochemical reactions, as in enzymes, cell defense, for example, antibodies, physiological development, for example, hormones, and the transport of important compounds, for example, hemoglobin. Indeed, proteins are essential to all organisms and participate in virtually all processes within the cell, from cell formation and function to its death. We are here today to learn about a particularly important protein called ubiquitin. Ubiquitin was so named because its presence is ubiquitous to many organisms. Although the protein itself was discovered in the 1970s, it took another decade to understand its function. From the early days of biochemistry, the focus of attention has been to understand how cells synthesize its many proteins, in particular, the mechanisms of transcription and translation. But not many researchers were interested to find out how proteins are degraded. After all, we think of life as creation and not destruction. As Albert Szent-Györgyi, a 1937 Nobel Laureate in chemistry, famously said, and I quote, "Discovery consists in seeing what everyone else has seen, and in thinking what no one else has thought." Close quote. Prof Ciechanover, together with his collaborators Avram Hershko and Erwin Rose, pursued their own scientific interests, which went against the trend of the research community, and saw what the others had not seen. During the early 1980s, they discovered one of the cell's most important processes, regulated protein degradation, which is mediated by that ubiquitous protein. For this discovery, Professors Ciechanover, Hershko, and Rose were recognized with the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2004. Thanks to their work, we now know that the failure of this ubiquitin-mediated protein degradation system can lead to many diseases and malignancies, such as cancer and various genetic disorders. Today, the Ateneo de Manila University is honored to host the keynote lecture of Professor Ciechanover. Professor Ciechanover was born in Israel on October 1, 1947. He received his Master of Science in 1970 and medical degree in 1974 from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He then obtained his doctorate in medicine in 1981 from the Technion Israel Institute of Technology, doing his dissertation under Dr. Hershko. Professor Ciechanover is currently a distinguished research professor at the Faculty of Medicine of Technion. Besides the Nobel Prize, Professor Ciechanover shared the Lasker Award in the year 2000, the second most prestigious prize in the medical sciences, and the Israel Prize in the year 2003, the highest recognition bestowed by the State of Israel. He is a member of the Israeli National Academy of Sciences and Humanities, the Pontifical Academy of Sciences at the Vatican, and the American Philosophical Society. This is Professor Ciechanover's second visit to the Philippines. Last January 7 to 11, he joined 3 other chemistry Nobel laureates at the 10th Eurasia Conference on Chemical Sciences, which was held at the PICC. He charmed the participants with his simple ways and insightful comments. At the Nobel Forum, where the topic of science and innovation was discussed, the inevitable question was raised. What does it take to win the Nobel Prize? To this he answered, and I quote, "We didn't plan on anything, and I think this is the lesson. You shouldn't plan on prizes and recognition or anything, but you should plan on one thing, being excellent." Close quote. Indeed, to be able to see what others have not seen requires excellence. So we are very pleased to welcome Professor Ciechanover back to the Philippines under the Bridges program, and we invite him to speak to us about why proteins must die so that we may live. Professor Ciechanover.
Good afternoon. Can I switch to the, somebody can, okay, great. If I had to change the title of my talk from "Why Proteins Have to Die So We Shall Live," I would have done it and call it "How to Deconvolute the Mystique of the Nobel Prize." So let me deconvolute the Nobel Prize into tiny pieces. So at the end of the talk, I hope that you will see that it's very simple and everyone can make it. But the idea is, again, as Fabian told you, not to make it to a prize, because we don't live for prizes. And even now, after being awarded the Nobel Prize, I get every morning up and then I have to go to work and to do something. You don't celebrate for the rest of your life with prizes. So prizes are not an aim for itself. They are some kind of recognition that society invented, made in order to recognize achievements. But nevertheless, the Nobel Prize has gone farther than any other prize. And if you ask people in the street, the average people, what prizes you have heard of, they will tell you that they've heard of the Oscar and the Nobel. Probably the first is the Oscar. I'm not sure about the Nobel even. But people are really interested, what does it take to get a Nobel Prize? Because when you look at the list of awardees, and the prize was first awarded in 1901, 107 years ago, you can really recognize, at least in sciences, I'm not talking about literature and peace and economy, but in sciences, in physics and chemistry and in biology and medicine, there is a mirror image of the development of human society in this century. You can look at Watson and Crick, the DNA, the secret of genetics. The first one to be awarded is Konrad Röntgen for the invention, for the discovery of the X-ray. So it's a very rich a collection of discoveries and inventions that accompany us as human beings. And so there is something about the Nobel Prize that took it that far away from any other prize. And again, I'm not a member of the committee and I'm not going to talk about the Nobel Prize, but I'm going to take myself as maybe an example and deconvolute it and show you the way that we have gone. Because typically when scientists take the podium in a scientific lecture, they will start immediately with a problem, where they are, what is the problem, what is the last adventure that they have done in their laboratories, and that's it. But you know, when we are talking about such a major problem, we need to go back and to ask what was known before us, how we decided to launch an attack on the problem, how we deconvoluted it, and what is the ultimate outcome, because what we discovered at the end, and I'll show you how I'm closing the cycle, ended up as drugs that are being infused to patients and cure them from cancer. So we are talking on very practical problems. We didn't discover, with all due respect, news stars that broadcast every half an hour some radio waves to Earth that we can absorb with very sophisticated receivers. We discovered a process that affects us all, and I'll take you through the process and through my own history, maybe as an example, not for success, but of how we can make a progress. So I was born in Israel, which is a tiny, small country. We are 6 million people only, less than 10% of the population of the Philippines, and unfortunately still involved with the wars around, and we haven't enjoyed even for one day the word peace in its full sense of the word. And nevertheless, it's a very well-developed country with excellent universities that grew up 8 Nobel Prize laureates in 60 years. And excellent science is going on there. The universities are primary leading world universities. My parents came from Poland. They left Europe, luckily, before the Holocaust. And they settled in what was then part of the British Empire. So it wasn't even an independent country. Israel became independent only in 1947 as an independent state. And the motto at home was studying, just studying. Whatever I remember, we were a blue-collar family, not well-to-do. My father was a clerk, but wherever I opened my eyes, I found books. We were drowning in ocean of books. So, and the push for study was very strong, and I went to elementary school and then to high school. And then in Israel, you know that everybody has to serve in the army, in the military. It's a national service, national obligatory service, which is very positive in a way. It's kind of an entry ticket to the Israeli society. And at the age of 18, everybody goes to serve in the army. But the army lets people postpone their service and first study in the university, especially professions that the army needs later. So engineers, medicine, and so on and so forth, physicians, can go first and study and then come and serve in the military in their profession. So I had no clue what science is. I had no clue what biology is, but there was a very strong pressure at home to go and study medicine. I mean, it's the dream of Jewish mothers that their kids will be physicians. I don't know why, but this has been history for centuries. So I was pushed to medical school, and I went to study in the only medical school in the country, in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, but then I realized it was a mistake. Or at least I didn't like what my mother wanted me to be. And then there was an opportunity to go for 1 year to do a master's degree in biochemistry. So I decided to leave the medical school for 1 year and to took the route to biochemistry, and I studied fatty liver, the mechanism of formation of fatty liver. And I realized that this is going to be my wife, the other wife, for the rest of my life, biochemistry. But nevertheless, because I had an obligation, a national obligation to serve in the military, not as an expert on fatty liver, the military is really not interested in fatty liver, but as a physician, as a combat physician, I went back to the medical school and graduated the medical school and went to the military for 3 years to serve as a combat physician. This was exactly 1973 when the Day of Atonement war erupted. It was a horrendous war. Israel was surprised. It was a failure of the Israeli intelligence. We didn't realize what's going on around. We were all asleep. And we almost lost the country, but then we were able to avert the picture in very courageous series of battles. And I was then a military physician in the Israeli Navy, in the missile boats. And I served on a missile boat, and I completed my military service following 3 years of very interesting service. I will not take you through the details, not because it's secret, because I just am lacking time. But this was a very good entry diploma or entry license into the Israeli society. Following my military service, I still had some kind of hesitations of what I want to do with myself, whether I want to be a real doctor, as my mother wanted me to be, or I want to be a scientist, a fake doctor. And then I decided to go to become a fake doctor. But beforehand, I spent 2 years in the operating theater. I still was deliberating, so I started my residency in surgery. But then I made a final decision, and I became a student again. And I enrolled into the graduate school of the Technion, where I met Avram Hershko, with whom I later shared the Nobel Prize. And I started almost all over again. I started my PhD studies, which took me 5 years. And during these studies, we discovered the ubiquitin system on which I'm going to tell you in a short while. And here again, there is a lesson for parents and for kids and for students. And the lesson is, you know, we are living in an era in which people are in a hurry. They are in a hurry to develop their careers. They are in a hurry to make money. They are in a hurry to nowhere. And I think that from my lesson, one can learn that you don't have to be in a hurry. And you have to do whatever you like to do and not to be pushed to do what you don't like to do. Because would have I ended up in medicine, I may have been very happy, but not as happy as I could be. And then I decided, after, and in Israel, you know, there is a military service, as I told you. You know, I went to medical school. Medical school by itself took me 8 years. And then I decided all of a sudden to become a student again and to go for another 5 years to the graduate school. And I was married at the time. We had a son. So I had a family and I had responsibility. But nevertheless, I decided that I don't want to do something that I'm not 100% sure I want to do for the rest of my life. And I decided to take another 5 or 7 years in graduate schools and then postdoctoral fellowship, and to do what will make me truly happy to my understanding. So I think that the lesson here is that, and nevertheless, again, I'm using it as a metaphor, don't misunderstand me. I am one, not of the youngest, but of the most young people that won the Nobel Prize. I won it at the age of 57, and I still hope I have another 15 or 20 years of fruitful life in the laboratory ahead of me. So you can still make choices in life and changing career routes and taking another 5 or 7 years to do whatever you like to do, and nevertheless make it all the way to the top. So it's not prohibitive. You don't lose time. That's what I want to tell you. You just make the right choice and do what you want to do. And if you do what you want to do, you will become also more efficient, and it will take you faster en route to your final or whatever destination you're aiming at. And this is a very important lesson, because many young people are coming to me and asking me about their career and how to develop it and what to choose and what's contemporary these days and what is not contemporary these days. And I always tell them, you know, I start to investigate them and asking them questions and sense where they are heading, but I always tell them, take your time. And if you think you made a mistake on the road, don't hesitate. Make a back turn. Take your car, drive it back to where you started, and start all over again. Nothing will happen. You will just gain. You cannot lose. So I went to graduate school, where we discovered the ubiquitin system. It also shows you how artificial is the Nobel Prize. We discovered the ubiquitin system in the late 70s and early 80s, and we got the prize about 20 years later, or 22 years later. It took time for the scientific community to appreciate the importance of the system, to many scientists to join in, and to drug companies to develop drugs, to appreciate the role of the system in human diseases. And in between the discovery and the Nobel Prize, I was basically anonymous. And I enjoyed a very nice life. I traveled all over the world. I went to wherever I wanted to do. I was not a celebrity. My name didn't show up on the websites of nobody. And it just shows you that the Nobel Prize is very nice to receive, but in a way it's artificial, because all of a sudden, once you get it, everybody invites you. But the discovery was made 25 years before. So in between, what happened? I was the same person. So it shows you that we should take it in the right proportion. Don't be too serious about prizes and recognition. Be more serious about what you are doing. And therefore, I really want to deconvolute it and to get to the essence of the discovery and to show you what's behind. And I hope that I'll make it simple enough so everybody in the audience will be able to bear up with me and to understand what we discovered. I finished my graduate studies, and then I went to a tiny, small institute on the east coast of the United States called the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I went to a very acclaimed department there, probably the leading department in the world of biology. The Department of Biology at MIT has many Nobel laureates, very famous department. And I spent 5 years in Boston and did my postdoctoral fellowship, and then I took another decision. I had many offers in the United States. Now you can imagine that I have even more offers in the United States. I declined them all and decided to go back to my country, like many of you that I talked to, like Fabian, your president, and there is much into it. The United States is very tempting. I mean, you're free there, lots of resources, but I thought even in the early 80s that if I can have an impact, I can have a much better impact on my own country than being drowning in the ocean of the Americans. You know, in America, 300 million people, it's not your country, it's the country of everybody there, and it's a melting society, beautiful society. I like America a lot, but I thought that I'm missing my language, my culture, my family, the small place that I grew up. The reason that my parents left Europe and came to establish a country in 47, fought all their life, the country in which I fought myself, in which my peers were killed during battles, and every Independence Day, the Independence Day of Israel this year will be on the 8th of May. The 7th of May is always the Memorial Day, which I spend the whole day in military cemeteries going to visit so-called tombstones of my friends and colleagues that were killed during battles. I thought that I'll have a greater impact by going back, and we made a decision to go back. And again, you see, I didn't make a mistake. You can still get to the tip of the Everest in a small, tiny country with limited resources. And now, I'm even stronger about this decision because the impact that I can have on systems, on education in Israel, on higher education, on lower education, elementary, as a Nobel laureate is unbelievable. I'm teaching kids and students. Every week I'm taking 1 day off to go to high schools, to elementary schools, to different educational forums, to talk to kids, to try to excite them about being a role model for them and so on and so forth. In a country of 6 million people, you can have true impact. And I'm sure that in the Philippines that it's still growing, its education system. People that are being educated in the United States and coming back, they may not enjoy the resources of Stanford and MIT and Harvard and Columbia, but on the other hand, they can have a huge impact on their country, which in my opinion is much more important than being drowning, than maybe having another paper or another scientific achievement, but nevertheless being diluted out in a huge population in which your contribution is less effective and less significant. So I came back to Israel in '84, established my own group in the Technion, which is our leading engineering school. We have also a Faculty of Life Sciences and a School of Medicine, where I am a faculty member of, and I've been there ever since. So it's more than 20 years that I'm back, and I have a very vivid group of scientists. I'm educating PhD students, postdoctoral fellows. They're going all over the world, and you start to see that you can harvest very nice fruits. Okay, so that's about the background. So you see the background is not very different than the background of any one of you. And you will see as we progress, when I deconvolute this complicated mystique of this gold medal that has the face of Alfred Nobel, the inventor of the dynamite, you will see that it's not simple, but elements can be identified and followed and traced down. So I was a graduate student with a wonderful teacher, Avram Hershko, which is another secret of life, to select the right teachers. And teachers and mentorship is critical in life. I mean, you need to have very good teachers. And I shared the Nobel Prize with my teacher. And the same year, other people like Linda Bach and Richard Axel also are student or postdoc and a teacher. And you will see that even if you, again, we can use the Nobel Prize story as a metaphor. you will see that Nobel Prizes grew up with Nobel Prizes or with famous scientists. There is something in the spirit of the teachers that teaches you, and it's not frontal teaching. It's more type of apprenticeship. And it's like surgery. I'm a surgeon or half a surgeon by education. Nobody can teach you how to operate. I mean, either you have it in your hands or you don't, but you have to see a good surgeon holding the scalpel, never lift it up, because once you lift it and you put it back, then you are damaging the tissue, then you are starting a new cut. You know, the idea is to go with, to make the maximum with a single cut and to use your fingers as the best knife in the world, because these are the most sensitive tools that we have. So it's mostly teaching by apprenticeship. Actually, my teacher doesn't speak at all, Avram. He never speaks. You have to follow him. You have to see how he designs experiments, how he designs control, and if you catch it, then you are on. He's a very, very peculiar type of a teacher, but nevertheless an excellent one, and I owe him a lot. So, so this is another element in success. So when I enrolled into the graduate school, I selected teachers. I interviewed with several of them, and then I had a sense that Avram is the right one for me. And Avram was interested in a question that almost nobody was interested in the time. This was highlighted by Fabian, and how proteins are degraded, how we destroy our own proteins. First of all, the word destruction, as Fabian highlighted, is not interesting. You know, when you look here in Manila, you see bulldozers bulldoze out old buildings. You said something new will come out. We don't care about this process. The same was for scientists. They didn't care about protein destruction. They cared only about construction, about how we synthesize our proteins, or in more professional word, how the genome is translated into the proteome, how we take the genetic information and make our own proteins. Destruction, garbaging was not interested. There were very few scientists that were interested in destruction. But this was a planned strategy. The planned strategy was that if you are in a small country with limited resources, you don't want to ride the highway. Because in the highway, you are doomed to collide head-on with the big American sharks in science. You are against the Stanford people, you are against the MIT people, you are against the Harvard people, Southwestern, Columbia, whatever you want, just name them out, all these Ivy League guys. If you're in a small place, you have to be original. So you have to think of something that nobody else thinks. And Avram thought about protein degradation, and many people warned us. They told us that we are going to commit suicide, that we are going slowly but knowingly to the cemetery. And we said, fine, that's okay with us. Let's try it. And we discovered something which is very peculiar, a very cumbersome mechanism that actually is now became a major biological platform for drug development, for pharma companies. All the big pharmas are working on it, and I'll give you an example of what's going on. So what are proteins? Fabian tried to tell you, proteins are our machines. You can imagine that life, if you look at life, and that may be very simple for the biologists among you, life is composed of two dimensions for me. The vertical dimension is the genetic material that we inherit to our children. And the horizontal dimension is our current life. I mean, once we have children, we are interested in life. But life, the horizontal life, are riding on top of the proteins. And the human body has about 25,000 proteins, depends how we count them. And these are the machines on which we are running. So there are the structural proteins like the bones and the muscles that carry us, that gives us the shape. And there are all the functional proteins, all the enzymes that catalyze the numerous biochemical reactions that makes us what we are. They digest the food, they convert the food into energy, into structure, they transmit signals so I can see you. So there is a signal that is transmitted to my eyes, the signal is going from the eye to my back brain, is being translated into a meaningful word. These are people that are sitting in an audience in the Ateneo University of Manila. Think about how complicated it is. I mean, just that I ask you, what is your name, and you answer me, that's an awfully complicated process that nobody understands. Nobody in this world understands this sequence of events that go from a single simple question, what is your name, that every kid of the age of 1.5 years can answer, to the answer. I'm asking a question and getting an answer. What in between? the understanding of the question, the translation of the question into the muscle movement that will be able to spell out the name correctly. We don't understand it, but we know one thing for sure. It's all directed by proteins. Receptors, vision, transmission of signals, channels of ions, and so on and so forth. So we are full of proteins that carry out most of our functions. About 99% of the functions are going behind us. We are not aware of them. We don't control the heart. I cannot control my heart. I cannot control my breathing. I can hardly control my talking. And even my standing here in front of you is a miracle. Think about it. To stand here stable, you know, if I die, God forbid, if I get a heart attack, I fall immediately. To stand in front of you, I have to get information, visual information, but I don't need the visual information because I can close my eyes and nevertheless stand. I get balancing information that goes to my ear and tells me exactly where I am. If I lift my finger and put it in the back, I can tell you exactly that it's my left hand that is upraised, and it's my second finger that I now move forward and I move backward, and I don't see it. So there is an information that is being transmitted that I can control backwards and forwards by sending orders from my brain to the finger and back information about the position of the finger. The same is true for my whole body. The fact that I am standing stable in front of you is the miraculous action of thousands of proteins that gives the information to my brain that will not make me fall forwards, backwards, and so on and so forth. You know, these are all activities that you don't think of. You are doing automatically. You get up, you go to sleep, you eat. But this is all something, there is a machinery behind it that is doing it. Nothing should be taken for granted. I mean, not even standing simply should never be taken for granted. It's an awfully complicated activity of the awfully complex human body. Think about it. We never think about it, but that's a fact. Everything else that we regard ourselves as human beings is an intellectual activity. You know, seeing the movies, writing, sculpting, designing buildings, and even working in the lab takes tiny small part of our culture. I mean, that's something that we invented and we made to ourselves, and it's also unique to the human species. Cows and chicken and birds are not involved in all these cultural activities. They have their own societal rules that are very interesting, but this is a very tiny, small, thin layer that the human society added upon itself, and it's different from nature, from country to country, from culture to culture, and even not all human beings, unfortunately, are enjoying what we can enjoy in the Western and in developing and developed countries. I mean, look at decimating Africa. I mean, they are far away from this auditorium and from this university, decades, centuries back. So all these activities that we regard as intellectual and creative activities are tiny, small layer that sits atop of our culture, and we are far, far away from understanding it. As I told you, we hardly understand the simple fact that I can stand stable. Even that is not understood. So what is in the mind of a scientist or an architect or a sculptor or a composer, we are generations from understanding. So this just gives you a context of where we are in the problem. So we are interested in how these proteins are destroyed, and the question is, why to destroy them at all? If they are so nice, if I can stand here nicely and speak to you and you even can understand me, I hope, why to destroy? I mean, why to destroy proteins? The reason for destruction of proteins is dual or triple, but we shall talk only on two main reasons. One is what we call quality control, and the other is control of processes. What is quality control? Proteins are very complex. And because they are complex, they are subject to denaturation, to misfolding. They are losing their function all the time. Think about a piece of meat that you leave by mistake on the table in the morning when you go to work, and you come in the afternoon and you say, wow, the only thing that you can do with it is throw it away. This piece of meat is basically a muscle that was taken from the cow, or from the chicken, or from the pig, from whatever animal you like, or from the fish. It cannot stand even the room temperature. it will be destroyed. It will stink and will be destroyed. The proteins in it, because they are so gentle, will be misfolded, so they are useless anymore. Now think about our body. You never thought of it. Our body is not at room temperature. Our body is at 37 degrees. This is an awfully high temperature. Think about 37 degrees outside in Manila. Well, you are maybe used to it. I'm also coming from a very warm country, but nevertheless, 37 centigrade is a very high temperature. Proteins cannot tolerate it. And the proteins on the piece of meat that you left on the table are not any different than the proteins in our body. Therefore, our proteins are getting misfolded and spoiled and damaged and harmed all the time, actually in a very high rate. I can give you the number. You will be amazed. Every day, we are destroying about 10% of our proteins. 10% of our proteins are disposed daily because they're getting spoiled and denatured and misfolded and non-functional. That means that within 15 days, it's not 10 days because of some mathematical calculations, within 20 days, 15 to 20 days, every single molecule in our body has been destroyed and replaced by a new one. It's unbelievable. When you look at the mirror, in 20 days you see the same face, and you will not imagine that actually you don't see the same face. Chemically, you don't see the same face. It was all exchanged with new molecules. 5 to 10% a day are being garbaged, are being destroyed and replaced with new ones because of temperature, because of oxygen in the air. Oxygen is deleterious. We love it because we need it for our high efficiency of energy production, but oxygen also hurts us. And there are many people that are taking antioxidants and so on and so forth in their diet as an additive, because we know that oxygen is damaging. So it's like, you know, people say that they are, whatever is good in life is also dangerous. So people, the lay people typically relate to women. The men say that women are enjoyable but dangerous, and wine. But actually, scientists think of it differently. Temperature and oxygen are also damaging for our body. So now we can challenge God and say, why God, whoever we believe in, and created us in 37 degrees? Why didn't God created us in the refrigerator temperature? And why God created the atmosphere that will have 21% of oxygen and not 4% of oxygen if it's so damaging? Well, this is the price of life. We have to pay a price. Because living in 37 degrees is very efficient for the biochemical reaction that we are catalyzing. Because reactions in chemistry are also catalyzed by temperature. If you lower the temperature, the rate of reactions is going down dramatically. So 37 degrees is a marginal temperature in between disease. You know that at 38 we are already sick. At 39 we are very sick, and at 42 we are basically dead. So that is true. So think about life. The whole span of life is 5 degrees only. Only 5 degrees, out of which 4 are useless. There are 4 degrees are for medical schools to teach students. Between 38 and 42, that's for medical students. We are living on a very narrow bridge of 37 degrees. So you see that evolution is very, very sensitive in that sense. What happens in 38 and 39 and 40 is that proteins become denatured. And at 42, some critical proteins become cooked eggs. And you know, cooked egg, you cannot make, again, a raw egg. This is only one way, and therefore we die at 42 degrees, because some critical proteins cannot stand this temperature. You can fry an egg, but you cannot take a fried egg and make it raw egg again. So the process doesn't go backwards, it can go only forward. Think about it also, it's very, very interesting. So these are the proteins. They are very sensitive to oxygenation. Oxygen also, the 21% was not chosen by nothing. It was also probably, these are the conditions in the atmosphere on the planet that allowed us, in equilibrium obviously with plants that make oxygen for us via photosynthesis, to live in symbiosis. But in 21% oxygen is very high, but on the other hand, again, this is the optimal concentration of oxygen that allows respiration to occur at the proper efficiency. I will not go into all these arguments, but again, this is the sword that we are living on. So this is the benefit, but also the price. And the price that we have to pay for living in 37 degrees and breathing air that has 21% of oxygen is the price of destroying our proteins. And in order to destroy them, we need to have a system. And the system must be a specific system. It must be specific because the system must recognize only the bad proteins and not the good proteins, and to select them out. Therefore, it's called quality control. What is quality control? It takes the bad quality away and keeps the good quality proteins still intact. And that's a major problem. And once this system is aberrated, we are in deep trouble. So all the neurodegenerative diseases, almost with no exception, Parkinson, Alzheimer, the different spinocerebellar ataxias, Huntington, I'm getting now to rarer diseases, are all the result of accumulation of garbage proteins in the brain. If you cut away, and I'll show you later, you cut away the brain of an Alzheimer patient, you will find proteins that should be degraded, should be removed, and are not removed. Accumulation of bad proteins is damaged proteins is very bad for us. Basically, it's the same that happens to the cheese or the meat that we leave on the desk at room temperature in the morning and don't put in the refrigerator. The only place for proteins to keep themselves is the low temperature, because in low temperature they don't collide and all the processes, all the kinetics is being slowed down. So protein degradation is extremely important. People didn't realize it. We didn't realize it, but we thought that there may be something behind there, and therefore we decided in the late 70s to go into it. The other reason why we destroy our proteins, and then I'll make a huge jump forward and tell you about the system and its benefits in medicine, and then I'll close the cycle, is control of processes. From time to time, we need to destroy even good proteins in order to control process. So I'll give you a very simple example. I don't know how cold it gets in Manila in the winter, but in Israel it gets quite cold, and the result is that many people get the flu. Actually, the hospitals in Israel are flooded with influenza patients, mostly the old people. They are more susceptible to the flu. And what happens typically in flu, if you are strong enough, even if you are old, you are developing antibodies and you defeat the disease. So it just takes a little bit of a time, of a miserable 2 weeks of muscle ache and fever and coughing and I don't know what. But if you get through it, you develop antibodies. You develop specific antibodies to the flu virus, to the specific strain that hit you. And the same is true also for polio, for example. I assume that in the Philippines, like in all other developed countries, people get shots against polio, and we eradicated the disease. And the same is for pertussis and for other diseases. What is this immunization? We develop antibodies to the disease, and we become immunized. In order to develop the antibodies, how does the body know? The body opens a faucet to the flu. What is the faucet? The faucet is a protein. So in order to turn on the factory of the antibodies to defeat the flu, we need to open a faucet that will enable these antibodies to be generated. The body can understand. When I'm telling you about faucet and pipelines, I'm talking basically on proteins. The body can speak only one language. It speaks the language of proteins, nothing else. All the functions in the body are being carried out by proteins. So this faucet is called a transcription factor. It's a protein that is being synthesized, and it allows specific antibodies to flu or to pertussis or to influenza, to other diseases or to polio to be developed at a certain point. Now we are out of the flu. We are already healthy. We don't need the faucet anymore. We don't need the antibodies. We are healthy. Why should the body waste time and energy on generating antibodies that we don't need anymore? We have to turn the faucet off. Turning the faucet off is destruction of the protein. We destroy the protein that was in charge of generating these antibodies. So we need to destroy. It's a very good protein. It can still function as a very good faucet, but we don't need it anymore. Why do we need to generate antibodies to flu, to influenza, that we don't have the influenza virus anymore? The virus is defeated. So from time to time, we control processes. And I'll tell you, when we talk about cancer, I'll show you another example. So this is the system that controls proteins. So we are involved in destruction. Once we are involved in destruction and we realize that, then we have 3 more tasks to do. We have to identify the system that destroys protein, and that's what we did for our life. Then you have to ask yourself, what happens if the system doesn't work? Namely, what diseases erupt, and I mentioned one or several, but I'll go later on in details. And the last question that people ask, practical people ask, if there is a disease, how can we go and cure it? Can we develop drugs to cure it? And I'll very briefly rush you through the system that we discovered. I'll jump very quickly, and I'll just give you the principles, and I will not go into any detail. So the system that we discovered is composed basically of two big elements. And the two big elements, you can metaphorize them as the legal system in any country. In the legal system, you have the court, and then you have the prison or the punishment. So the court is the one to decide, and the other echelon is the one to execute the decision of the court. Let it be the prison, the electric chair, God forbid, I don't know what. But it's a two-step system. So in the cell, it's also a two-step system. First of all, this is the target protein. Well, I hardly see but this is the target protein. So the target protein is the protein that the cell decided is not good anymore. We don't need it. We have to dispose of it. There is a small protein called ubiquitin that was mentioned by Fabian earlier that is a tagging protein. The Swedish in the Nobel Committee, they called it the kiss of death. I didn't like the term so much because kiss and death are kind of contradictory, but or at least in my opinion, but ubiquitin kisses the protein to its death. It marks it down, so it is going to die. The protein is not dead yet. You see it's still alive, but it has ubiquitin now sitting on it. And we elucidated, I will not go into detail, we elucidated the chemical reactions to its final and finest detail. We identified all the enzymes. By the way, it's protein that executes protein. Again, I'm now taking it for granted that you understand me. We are talking one single language, the language of proteins. There is no other language that the body understands. So we identified all the proteins, the E1, the E2, the E3s, and everything that's occurring. And now, once the protein is being tagged by ubiquitin, this is the executioner. These are the pair of the scissors, and they are coming, and the tag is being adhering to the scissors. The protein is being opened and cut into pieces. So basically, ubiquitin is a bridge. It's not a bridge for peace in this case. It's a bridge for destruction, but a very useful bridge. It's basically a glue that takes the protein on one hand and glues it to the scissors. If we go back, you can see that at that point, nothing is touching. The protein has just the kiss of death, but the kiss didn't kiss anybody yet. It kissed, for a kiss you need two partners. So in that case, the kiss kissed only one. Now it brings the partner in. It glues them together. Now they attach, open, and cut. So that's the end of the protein. The protein is destroyed, and the body is relieved now from something it doesn't need. Now, let's go to medicine, and I'll close with this one. I hope you'll understand it. I'll try to make it as simple. How does the problem of destroying protein has to do with human diseases? I explained to you a little bit of accumulation of wrong proteins, but I'll go further into it and tell you a very personal story. So I started with myself, and I'll end up with myself. Not that I like myself very much, but myself is probably the only person I can learn lessons from, except for my teachers. So what happens in the protein destruction system is exactly what happens in any other biological parameter. So this is the system. In the middle, you see this. You see the system, and if you look at the right side, the pointer is not strong enough. The right side are proteins that are being synthesized and degraded, so they're being kept in steady state. So this is the green. And you can think about our body. The body, the living body is always in a steady state. We are in a steady state of a body weight. Once we grow up, we keep our body weight. I wish I had the body weight of the average Filipinos. It's much lower than the body weight of the average European. But the body weight of the average person in the West is about, a man is about 80 kilograms. A woman should be 65, not you. You are much less. So despite the fact that we are eating kilograms of food a day, we are eating 1-2 kilograms of food a day, we are keeping our body weight. We are keeping our blood pressure. We are keeping our glucose level. We are keeping our phosphate and potassium and sodium, and zillion other parameters are being kept in a value, in a steady state, in a dynamic steady state. So it's going in and out. You can eat as much salt as you want. I mean, you can pour tons of salt into your food. At the end, the salt concentration in the body is more or less constant. It's not healthy to have a lot of salt. It will lead to high blood pressure, but the concentration in the blood will more or less be the same. The same is for proteins. So proteins are in a steady state. When things go wrong, whenever they go wrong in any disease, in fever, we get a high fever, something is going wrong. We get a high blood pressure, high glucose, high calcium, high phosphate, or low. So when things go wrong, when the proteins are either degraded excessively, so they go below their value, or something happens and they are not degraded and they go up. So it's the same, the diseases of protein destruction, when they are not destroyed properly, when they are either overly destroyed or under-destroyed, is no different than the mechanism, the pathogenetic mechanism of any disease that you can read in any simple textbook of medicine. Just the same. It's a deviation from normalcy. Either way, it's a deviation from normalcy. Now, here is the brain. I don't show you patients, but I can show you sections of brains of patients. These are all patients with Alzheimer's disease. And they accumulate garbage in the brain. Each rectangle is taken from one patient. And these patients are accumulating proteins that are tagged by ubiquitin, so they got the kiss, but they didn't get the partner. The partner somehow fails to approach these proteins and to degrade them, and these patients are accumulated this flame, you know, this brownish proteins in their brain. And they are succumbing to Alzheimer, and the same is true for Parkinson, and the same is true not for all types of Alzheimer, not for all types of Parkinson, but in general to many of those diseases. But what I want to do more, I want to go to cancer, because cancer is a disease of the 20th century. Why of the 20th century, and why not of the 19th century? In the 19th century, people didn't die of cancer, simply because they died earlier of other diseases. Not because cancer was not there. One of the features of one of the major revolutions of the 20th century is the extension of lifespan. We are now living, I believe, even in the Philippines, everywhere, in the Western countries or in the developed countries, men are living the average of 76 to 78 years, women are living 2 years longer, but people are living much longer. I mean, I just met 2 weeks ago, I was visited in Israel by another Nobel Laureate, by Rita Levi-Montalcini from Italy, from Rome. And actually, she is originally from Turin, but now she is living in Rome. And she is 99 years old. As lucid as I am, actually I'm complimenting myself. I think she is more lucid than I am. I'm trying to catch up with her. So people are living longer, but it's true. On the average, lifespan has more than doubled in the 20th century, mostly because of 2 or 3 achievements. One is defeating or partial defeating of infectious diseases. This was the invention of the antibiotics, the discovery. It's not an invention. Antibiotics are made by bacteria. So Fleming and Waxman discovered antibiotics. They didn't invent them. They were genius enough, in this case, Fabian, to see what others could not see, not to think. I mean, this was a surprise for Fleming. And the antibiotics, and also understanding the essence of hygiene, of public health, of community health, sanitation of water, and so on and so forth. So I would say that these 2 parameters in the 50s, the 40s and the 50s, really propelled us and gave us another decades of life that we didn't enjoy before. At the turn of the century, old people were about 40 years old. People died at the age of 40. By the way, the definition of old is non-existing in my opinion. There is no, I remember when I was a kid, I looked at my father who was 50 years old. I'm now 60, and he looked for me like somebody from an ET, an extraterrestrial. I mean, somebody that came from completely different planet, very old. So we are pushing age, and rightly so. I mean, I'm not joking, and rightly so. Age is a matter of spirit and of function and of activity. And as I told you about Rita Levi-Montalcini, and obviously people say, oh, I want to be old. I want to grow to be old. I guarantee you that once science will defeat Alzheimer and neurodegenerative diseases, and we shall push. By the way, we are still on the linear curve of lifespan. So every year that you are living, you are making another month of life. You are gaining, because we are still pushing up. We haven't stopped. We are not on a plateau of our lives. So the people that are being born today are probably will live, on the average, 12 to 14 years longer than we do. So we haven't stopped it yet. It's a very interesting phenomenon. So every year we are gaining 1 month, about 1 month of life. By knowledge, by science, by technology, by developing new medical intervention techniques. I'm not talking about quality of life yet. We have to make a distinction, but we are heading on. So at the turn of the century, when people ask, how do you want to grow old? They said, oh, I wish I will make it to 40. Now they say, I wish I will make it to 90. And then once we'll defeat 90 and we'll make it to 130, people will think, oh, 90, I'm still young. I have another 40 years to run around. And the whole idea of retirement at the age of 65, think about it. We never bother even to stop for a minute and to think about life. The idea of retirement of 65 is basically, for many of us, is non-existing. I mean, what's 65? I mean, people are still very young and very active at that age, and this is something that was brought to our life by the Prussian king. The retirement, the idea of social life and retirement, and the 65, and countries are now trying to push it further. Japan was 60 until a few years ago. Now the universities pushed it to 65, and they're still heading on. And in Israel, we are pushing it now also to 68 and 69. So you see that we are moving. So cancer is a phenomenon of the old age. I'm sorry that I stopped. I made it. We philosophized a little bit about aging. And so there is cancer of children, but it's a very rare disease. I mean, it's tragic. When we see kids sick with malignancies, our heart shrinks, and it plays on the deepest strings of our hearts. But nevertheless, statistically, public health-wise, it's not a problem. Public health-wise, cancer is a problem of the 6th and 7th and 8th decade. So what is cancer and how it's related to our discovery? Tightly related. And I'll try to explain you how it's related. You can imagine that cancer is like a car. Now let's think about a car. What is a car? A car have 4 wheels, and let's take away the radio and the stereo and the electric roof. Let's forget about all the gadgets that BMW and Mercedes invents for us, and let's think about the basics. And the basics of the car are the engine that can be propelled and moved by the gas pedal, and then the brake. Without these two elements, without the gas pedal and the engine and the brakes, the car is useless. Let's forget about the steering wheel for a minute. But otherwise, in between the steering wheel, the wheels, the engine, and the two pedals, we are done. Now, if we don't have brakes, then it's a dangerous car. Then we cannot stop. We shall just cross red lights and keep on running. If we shall brake and we will not be able to move, then it's not a car. Then we don't need it. So basically, when we think about driving is a balance of our legs between these two pedals, between the brake and the gas. Now, cancer is not much different, except that it's much more complicated than the car. While sitting here in the audience and listening to me, every one of you, including myself, has developed several millions of cancer cells. Every one of you has developed during the last hour several millions of cancer cells, but the body destroyed them. So the body has these wonderful spectacles to immediately diagnose a mutation in a cancer cell and to take the cell away, to apoptose, to induce death on this cell. How? By proteins. These proteins are called, on the right side, tumor suppressors. They suppress tumors. They suppress cancer. One of the most famous ones is called p53. It's the name of a protein called p53, a very famous tumor suppressor. Basically, being exposed to the heat and to the light and to the sun and to the UV and to the, all the gases that are here in the air of Manila and of Tel Aviv and of all these big industrial cities in the world, we are developing every hour, every one of us, millions of cancerous cells. It's frightening. It's truly frightening because you say to yourself, millions an hour, millions a minute. If one escapes, I'm lost. I will succumb to cancer. No, most of you will not succumb to cancer. And if, God forbid, it will be hopefully late in age. The body is awfully efficient in removing each and every one of these million cells every minute, every second, every millisecond. How? By tumor suppressors. Now, you can imagine that these tumor suppressors, by mistakes, are being degraded by the ubiquitin system. They are being removed. The good guys, the policemen, we are taking the policemen from the city. There are no policemen in the city anymore. The city will become violent. That's what happens to us. If there is a mistake in the ubiquitin system and the tumor suppressors will be removed mistakenly, we shall lose the protection against cancer and we shall develop a cancer. I'll give you one example. This is a very famous cancer. It's cancer of women, of the uterus, of the uterine cervix, caused by a virus called the human papilloma virus. What the human papilloma virus is doing, the virus itself, in order to induce cancer, the virus induces or misleads the ubiquitin system to degrade p53, to destroy. The virus tells the system, this guy is a bad guy, destroy it. But actually it's a good guy. But this thief or robber that wants to invade our body tells the body to rid itself of the good guy, and the tumor suppressor is degraded. It's removed and therefore expose our body to cancer. Let's look at the other side of the equation, and then I'll take you to the drug and I'll end up with this one. The other side of the equation, so these are the brakes. Remember, the tumor suppressor are the brakes. Whenever the car starts to accelerate, to develop cancer, the tumor suppressor breaks it. But we need also the gas, otherwise we cannot move. And cancer, by the way, what is cancer? Cancer is a disease in which cells are dividing in an uncontrolled manner. They are making tumors. We need our cells to divide, but we need them to divide under control, because we are replacing our cells all the time in the gastrointestinal tract, in the bone marrow, elsewhere in the lungs. We are replacing our cells all the time. The way that we are replacing them are by proteins that push them to divide. So they push the cells to divide. But then there is like a counter. They make sure that the division will not be too fast, that the clock will move like a Swiss clock, or the car will move only at an appropriate speed and will not overspeed. These proteins are called oncogenic proteins, or growth-promoting factors, the EGF receptor. Again, I will not confuse you with all the names because I want to make this talk as popular as I can. But these are oncogenic proteins, and these oncogenic proteins are the ones that push the cells to divide. Now, you can imagine that if they push too hard, we shall develop cancer, namely, if they will not be degraded. How we keep them? How we know that they are under control? Because we degrade them all the time. We keep them under control. If these proteins will not be degraded, they will not be destroyed, they will accumulate. And that means that we are pushing the gas pedal in the car in an uncontrolled manner. So now, let's look at the balance again, and it will make much more sense to you. If we shall either decrease the degradation of tumor suppressors, of the brakes, or decrease the degradation of proteins that will decrease the degradation of proteins that are the gas. We'll have more gas in the car. In both conditions, the car will go faster. So if we have no brakes or we'll have an excess of gas, the car will go faster. That means that the cells will divide faster, and that means that we are on to develop cancer. So you can see here that the word degradation or destruction shows up on the two sides of the equation. Increased degradation of the brakes. Let's say that you have no brakes. You use the brakes all the time in your car. You wear them out. The car has no brakes. So you increase the degradation of the brakes, or you decrease the degradation of the growth promoting factors, and you have more gas in the car will drive much faster, and you will succumb to cancer. So now we know why we degrade our proteins. We know how they are degraded, the ubiquitin system. We know what happens if it goes wrong. And now let's go to the last one, and that's a drug. And I'll show you only one drug. The drug was developed by an American company. It's being used successfully for cancer. And it's a multi-billion-dollar sales drug. And we have nothing to do with it. We didn't patent any of our discoveries. We just published it. So unfortunately, my university doesn't make any money out of it, of the intellectual property. This is a very strong trend these days in universities to patent discoveries of faculty members so the universities can enjoy the IP, which is a very nice source of income. And now we do it, and our university has many inventions, not in this field, in other fields, in which they enjoy royalties. So you can see it's a drug, a true drug. It comes in a bottle. It's made by Johnson & Johnson. It's a big pharma company in the United States. It's a chemical. It's a boronic acid derivative. The chemist of you will know what it is. It's a peptide. It's an aldehyde peptide with a few rings, and I will not go into the chemistry. But it's a strong anti-cancer drug. It inhibits the ubiquitin system. It's an inhibitor of the ubiquitin system. So by inhibiting the ubiquitin system, it slows down the division of the cells. And because in many cancers, as I told you, many proteins, if we go back to the disease, here, there is decreased degradation. The ubiquitin system is not active. It's low than it should, and therefore it allows the gas proteins to accumulate. So if we inhibit the ubiquitin system, we can get it back to normal, and that's the drug. And you can see here one patient. I'll explain to you the patient. The patient has a leukemia. Leukemia is a blood cancer, and this is a biological marker of the disease. It's in this case, it's an immunoglobulin molecule. I will not bother you, but you can see that the disease is progressing. The disease is going up. We use this marker as an indicator to the severity of the disease. Here the patient started on chemotherapy, very severe chemotherapy, and you see that it helped a little bit, but then the disease attacked again. And here started a treatment with Velcade, and you can see that the disease is really going down. And you can see here another patient, you can see with the same disease. Again, it won't tell you much, but the picture will talk to you. This is the bone marrow. The bone marrow is the factory that makes our blood, that makes the red blood cells and the white blood cells. And you can see that the malignant bone marrow, the patient that has the leukemia, the bone marrow looks homogeneous. It's all occupied with malignant cancerous cells. 41% of the cells in these patients are malignant. Following treatment with the drug, we went down to only 1% of the malignant cells, and you can see that the bone marrow now is redder, is reddish. I mean, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, all the normal elements of the bone marrow are back. I'll show you just one more slide, which will again give you an idea of what's going on. This is a computerized tomography of a patient. Actually, what you see here is the chest. If you want to get orientation, it's a little bit of a cruel orientation. There is a very famous exhibit now. I just saw it a week ago in the United States. It's called Bodies. I don't know if you heard about it. It's an invention of a German physician, how to preserve bodies in a very nice way. And you've heard about it? You should just Google out the bodies, and it's fascinating. And the whole exhibit is of human bodies, true human bodies that are sectioned in different ways. So you can learn the anatomy, and even for me as a surgeon, as a physician, it was truly illuminating. It shows up in several places all over the world, in 15 places simultaneously. I think that it's in Asia somewhere now also. I saw it in Las Vegas a week ago, but it's also it's a big hit in New York. It's #1 hit now in New York. And so in the bodies, you get acquainted with your own body, with the internal. So just to get you an idea of where we are in this picture, it is as if I cut my body here, like with a knife, and then lifted the upper part and looked down. So what do you see here? You see here this bone, that's my sternum. You see here the vertebra. You see this is my spine. And you can see here the canal. This is the canal in which the spinal cord, our spinal brain, is going in. You can see here the ribs. You can see a cut through my rib. You can see here the scapula, my shoulder bone. You can see here the muscles of my shoulder. You can see here the intercostal muscles that allow me to raise my chest and to breathe. And you can see here the heart with the big vessels of the heart. So it's a very nice section that was done by the computerized tomography. Actually, it's a non-invasive procedure. I don't have to cut and to look. I don't have to go to the exhibit. I can look via the CT. But look here. There is something bad here. There is a tumor sitting here in the right gate of the lung. Here you can see a tumor, and following treatment you can see that the tumor is almost gone. It was shrunk from 2.5 by 1.2 centimeter to 0.4 by 0.4 centimeter due to the treatment with this drug. So if we let again the ubiquitin system going up and now degrade the gas proteins that are there that are non-functional, that are functioning in excess, we now slow the car down again and we can find cure to cancer. Now let me tell you two stories now, and I'll end up with these two personal stories. One is personal and the other is even more personal. And one is just fresh from the oven. I just heard it 3 days ago. The one story is coming from the Nobel ceremony in Stockholm in December. The Nobel Prize is always being awarded on December 10th, which is the date that Alfred Nobel died. And in his will, he said that there will be these prizes being awarded in 5 categories on December 10th. And it was around Christmas, and Christmas is always celebrated along with a Jewish holiday, which is called Hanukkah. So they are almost overlapped. So the Israeli ambassador to Stockholm gave us a party. It was a big celebration in Stockholm. And we came to the party, and he said to me, Aaron and Avram, and Aaron, I have a surprise for you. And whenever people tell me I have a surprise, I think that they are going to give me a nice wrapped gift with a ribbon that I have to open. But this was not the case. The surprise was a walking human being. I never met him before, Swedish guy, Johan Oskarsson, and he told me the following story. He told me that until 4 weeks ago, he was basically dying of this disease in the Karolinska Institute Hospital, which is the major big hospital in Stockholm. And at that time, the drug was still experimental, and the physicians decided to treat him with the drug. And within 2 weeks, he was standing on his feet. The disease was completely gone. It's not said that the disease is gone forever, but he went into a very stable remission. I'm using the oncologist terms. It's called remission. He went into a stable, long-term remission, and he came to thank us. I said, thanking me for what? I didn't develop the drug. The drug was developed based on our discovery. He said, yes, but without your discovery, people couldn't have discovered the drug, which is true, which also shows you the way of science these days. So somebody discovered one thing, somebody else discovered the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and all together we are generating a chain. You don't have to discover the basic discovery and then go all the way to discover the drug. Somebody else will do it. I mean, and that's the beauty of science and of the scientific community that can bridge itself not only in peace, not only generating peace, but generating knowledge, and a very useful knowledge. And the way that we can communicate these days via the internet and via databases and remote teaching is just fascinating, because we don't have even to see one another. We can transfer knowledge all across. For me, it's also a matter of of peace, of a true peace, because I don't know the guy. He belongs to a different culture, to a different religion. Probably never heard of what we are doing, but all of a sudden we are connected. The other story is almost the same story. I'm now less excited about it because I've undergone the first story, but we are dealing, because we are here in the university, and universities have to look for money aside from the governments and aside from tuition fees. They are fundraising. And my institute is heavily involved in fundraising, and I am too helping the institute to raise millions and millions of dollars to enable our activities. A year ago, I was in San Francisco with my president raising money, and we were approached by a Jew that got this disease. He got the disease, multiple myeloma, this type of leukemia, and he already gave to the institute, but he gave to the engineering part. He gave to our water institute. We have a very good water institute. And he was amazed by the story, and he said, Aaron, I want to give you money for research. And I said, don't give me any money. I'm not here to raise personal funds, and just give to the engineering schools. They cannot cure cancer, but I'm here to help them. And so he continued giving to the institute, and then he was cured from the disease by the drug. And he called me and the president 3 days ago, just before I left the country. And he said that because the drug cured him so far, he decided to make an extra pledge to the institute. And as long as he is alive, every year he is going to give so many $1 million to the institute, which for me is also heartwarming, because it's going back to where I belong, and so on and so forth. So for me, I now want to take you in the last statement to the very beginning of my talk. And the very beginning of my talk was that I decided not to be a physician, a practicing physician, though I graduated a medical school. And I ended up talking and seeing patients that I was able to help indirectly. So you see that the world is, and the routes that our fate takes us are serendipitous. I escaped medicine because I felt that it's not for me, and I wanted to become a scientist. And all of a sudden, I discover something, and based on this something, somebody else discovers a disease mechanism, and then somebody else develops a disease, and at the end, there is a patient. And the patient is coming back to you to thank you. So it's not an anonymous patient. It's not a population of patients. It's a patient that has a name, that calls you or your president, or comes to meet you at the ambassador's party and tell you that though you are not his personal physician, you are able to help him. And I think that this is so wonderful about the world of science and of biological science. And I think that it is also so wonderful about the world that we are living in, and about the program that is sponsored by Bridges, because I was not born in the Philippines. I don't speak Filipino. I am foreign to this culture. I am very curious about it. I'm coming the second time. I may come the third and the fourth time. But it doesn't take any time to make friends and to generate a common language. With Fabian, I met him in January. I came to the conference that he organized, because scientists can very easily make these bridges. And if it's facilitated by such organizations, it's even more wonderful. So I would like to thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ciechanover, for that very fascinating lecture. Please join me here at center stage for our open forum. Okay, so we now come to our open forum. We have asked one of our young biochemists to prepare a question to start off the open forum, but we'd like to invite the rest of the audience to please approach our microphones afterwards and ask your question. Please give your name and affiliation before you ask the question. So may I ask Ms. Karen Manalastas to give us her question.
Good afternoon, sir, and thank you for coming again to the Philippines to share with us your insights. Actually, at the start of this talk, I had many questions to ask you, but I think you pretty much answered a lot of them already. So I have 2 questions left. The first one is a technical question, and the second one is a personal question. So for the technical question, when you were discussing the ubiquitin-mediated protein degradation, you said that there were two parts. And I was actually more interested in the first part because after recognition, it has the tag, and it seems pretty straightforward that the proteasome will recognize that it's tagged and it's degraded and so forth. But I think, at least it was my impression, that the recognition phase is much more complicated because out of the thousands of proteins, how can our body exactly tell when a protein is bad? So how much, sir, do we know about the recognition process?
Well, this is the $60,000 question. To be serious, this is the critical question about the ubiquitin system, how the system can select the proteins. And it can select it. I didn't want intentionally to go into the details. There was an enzyme that binds to the substrate, and this enzyme is called E3. And actually, there is not a single E3. There are about thousands of E3, 1,000 E3s in the human genome. People could not imagine, but the ubiquitin system constitutes about 7 or 8% of the total human genome, just for the structure. Now, these E3s each recognizes something wrong, quote unquote, that happens to the protein. It can be either misfolding that exposes some hydrophobic patch, it can be oxidation, it can be phosphorylation. The phosphorylation can be on a threonine residue and a serine residue. I don't want to go into details. But each protein will have its own story. So each protein, like an individual, like you are an individual that has an identity and I am an individual that has an identity, each protein will expose to the system its own story to be recognized by a specific ubiquitin ligase that will then ubiquitinate it. Once it's ubiquitinated, once it's kissed, then it becomes common. Then nobody cares. Then the proteasome will come, will bind the ubiquitinated proteins, and will grind it to small pieces. But the recognition is specific to each and every protein, and it's carried out by a cohort of 1,000 proteins.
Sir, follow up to that. Is there a one-to-one correspondence between the genes of these E3 and to the different E3 variants themselves, or is it like antibody generation where there is recombination?
No. It's not like antibody generation at all. There is a one-to-one relationship between the E3 and the substrate that it recognizes. True, one E3 can recognize several substrates if this substrate will carry a common recognition motif. So let's say that you have a specific sequence, XYZD, and then another protein will have an XYZD, and this XYZD will be phosphorylated specifically, then the same E3 can recognize two proteins. And then the distinction will be that one protein will be phosphorylated at a time and the other will not. So only the one that is phosphorylated on this specific sequence will be recognized. But it's not antibodies at all. It's one-to-one recognition.
Okay. Now, sir, for the second question, how do you harness creativity in research? How do you harness creativity in research? Like, for example, you, sir, how do you go about looking for problems to solve?
Well, that's also a very complicated one. It takes a lot of gut feeling, you know, creativity and originality. I quote somebody else, it's not my original quote, are hard to define, but when I see them, I know them. So it's very hard and it's very dynamic. I have a very good group of students, and we read together, and we are generating the problems as we move. And it's combined with gut feeling, with experience. We always try to be original in the sense that we are not tempted to go by fashion. So there are some rules that we try to follow. So if everybody will do knockout, let's say that we discover a new enzyme. The next day, I'm sure that somebody in America will knock it out from a mouse. I will never do it, because it's the obvious thing, and it may be interesting, but we don't do obvious. We don't, it's a matter of approach to science. There are people, and both approaches are legitimate, that will go and fish. They will go to fishing expedition. You know, they will throw a bait and a hook, and, you know, they will throw it enough times that at the end, some goldfish will come out, which is a legitimate approach. We call it bootleg type of science, you know, screening of the genome, large-scale screening. We never do it. We go bottom up. We have one protein and we ask a single question and we go to identify the mechanism. So I'm like, more like a watchmaker. You know, in order to understand the way that a mechanical watch is working, the only way to understand the way that a mechanical watch is working is to take it into pieces. You cannot explain it theoretically. You take a cloth, you take the watch out, you take each piece, you put it on the cloth, and then you put it together. If it works, you know how it works. Because if you put one piece wrongly, it doesn't work. So we take a non-fashion approach. We take the bottom-top approach. I'm helped by others. Cannot read all the literature. I'm listening to other ideas. We are filtering ideas. Somebody has an idea, we discuss it. Somebody else says, no, this is a bad idea. Somebody else did it. It's a dynamic process that is going on, but it has some recognized elements in it.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you. May I have the lady over there, please?
Good afternoon, Dr. Ciechanover. I'm Risa Martir from Biology Department. May I ask a favor? I wanted you to flash that slide about the kiss of death, the one with E1, E2, E3, and the target protein with the different ubiquitin.
I'm sorry that I selected some more popular slides because I have my computer is not here. I have a more detailed, chemically detailed.
Yes, but right before, yes, that one. My question is, you mentioned molecular scissors. So would that depend on how many specific ubiquitin are actually attached to your target protein? Or does it also depend on how E1, E2, and E3 are configured? Or I'll simplify my question. Are there different kinds of molecular scissors?
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting question. It again takes me to a very specific answer. We still don't know what's going on, but the attachment of one ubiquitin to the other is also going via a specific bond, the peptide bond. And the peptide bond has to be specific on a specific lysine residues, and ubiquitin has several lysine residues. And you can make variable chains. I didn't tell you that from the time that we discovered the system, it exploded, basically. And it went to different routes, to what I call non-proteolytic routes. So if you build chains that are not on specific lysines, they will serve other functions that will not be recognized by the proteasome. What is currently believed, let's boil down your question again to pinpoint it. What is currently believed is that you need a polyubiquitin chain in order for the proteasome to recognize, and this polyubiquitin chain must be of a specific structure, but there are many various structures. What we discovered in the laboratory, and again, I don't want to elaborate on it because most of the audience is far away and it's small, tiny details, using all kinds of mutations, we mutated systematically ubiquitin. We found that you don't have to make a long kiss. You can make several short kisses, so you can ubiquitinate the proteins on different places, but only once, and the proteasome will nevertheless recognize it. So probably the proteasome needs many, but it doesn't care whether the many are in a chain or scattered as singular. So we called it multiple monoubiquitination rather than polyubiquitination. This type we call poly. The novel type that is not published yet, and we are going to send it soon for publication, is called multiple mono. And so it's a very good question, but the proteasome needs several. And it needs them in a specific configuration, probably.
Thank you. The lady there, please. Is it okay?
No?
Yes, please. Yeah, I think you can.
Is it working?
It's working.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ciechanover. That is a fantastic talk, and I'm already grateful to Dr. Laureate for promising me to have about 5 or 10 minutes of your time so that we can interview you for our radio program, which will be heard by many more Filipinos. My question is related to this medicine that you mentioned, where your work has been applied. I am sure that that is beyond the reach of many of our people. Unfortunately, I understand that cancer is now the number 3 or 4 killer in the Philippines. So we have to focus on preventive measures. Given that these proteins in our body seems to be kissing each other without our permission, what preventive measures can we do at the individual and institutional or policy level so that we can reduce the incidence of cancer?
Well, you touched on two issues in your question, and each of them deserves special attention, and I'll try just to be very brief because each of them is very heavy. The one of them is affordability of drugs. This was the beginning of your talk. And that's unfortunate. You know, we saw the fight because it has to do, you know, developing drugs on one hand is extremely expensive, but once you have a blockbuster, the company is making billions of dollars. But on the other hand, at the same token, they can lose billions of dollars. Look at Merck. I don't want to go into details. Merck is now going to lose a lot of money. They lost already on Celebrex. Now they are going to lose on another drug, on Etrivine. I don't want to go into it. But on the other hand, you are right that most of the population of the world doesn't get what it should because of all kinds of obstacles on the way. Licensing, intellectual property, pricing, you know, you name it. Which is something that shouldn't happen because we are limiting basically spread of knowledge and the benefits of knowledge from a large part of the population. This is an extremely heavy moral issue that sits as burden on my shoulder, but mostly on the shoulders of politicians because it goes beyond the shoulders of the scientists. I can, you know, if a drug is being developed by a drug company, I cannot give it for free to anybody. I don't have it for free myself. So this is, I'm just highlighting what you said. I'm not coming with any solution. But politicians should really, and especially, you know, think about Africa. You know, now take AIDS, for example. AIDS is a prime example. AIDS now, people don't die of AIDS almost. People are living with AIDS for decades with a very sophisticated triple and quadruple type of a treatment. But in Africa, they are still dying of AIDS like nothing. I mean, they don't get the drugs because of all these obstacles. And it just cannot be. I mean, we cannot bear this idea that the knowledge that is available is not there. So this is one question. The other question is chemoprevention. It has to do with prevention. And that's true for all medicine. I just talked to the president of the university, and he mentioned to me something which is very painful, but it's so true, that physicians and scientists are looking at public health officers and professionals from above. But the main problem is preventive medicine and community medicine. Because, first of all, you have a mass effect. Second, it's cheap. It's always cheaper than treatment of patients, always cheaper. So you can achieve much more by preventing, and it's cheaper, and you don't need that sophistication of laboratories and research and development and so on. And we can think about simple things. Think about smoking and lung cancer. All what you have to do is not smoke. I mean, very simple. Not that everybody can stop smoking, but at least society can offer a simple solution. Think about cholesterol and heart attacks. All what you have to do is either to, you know, for the healthy people to avoid lots of cholesterol, not to eat so many eggs and meat and I don't know what. And if you have high cholesterol, to have a drug. It's called statin. I mean, there are many statins. They are very active drugs. They are inhibitors of cholesterol biosynthetic pathway, of the first enzyme along the pathway. And people are doing it. It's a multi-billion-dollar selling drug in the Western world. I'm sure that in the Philippines, also many people are using it, those that have access to it. So this is type of prevention, but it's two types of prevention. One is behavioral prevention, and the other one is proactive prevention by drugs. But nevertheless, it's cheaper than getting a heart attack and going to make a coronary bypass and occupying a bed in the intensive care unit and I don't know what. So we need to understand mechanisms of diseases. We need to understand what causes cancer. Cancer is a much more complicated disease. For example, the human papillomavirus that I mentioned with the uterine cancer is going to be eradicated in no time because there is a new immunization. But again, immunization requires that the public authorities will decide to immunize all girls. It's now recommended in the UK, in Europe, in Australia. I don't know about the Filipinos. But the expectation is that within few years, when the populations will be immunized, this cancer will go away, completely go away. It's a highly efficient immunization. Think about polio. Think about other diseases that were defeated by immunization. So it's all a matter of development of drugs or appropriate prevention, plus decision of governments and health authorities to invest little in the beginning in order to gain more at the end. The problem is always that people cannot think unless they have a problem immediately. So it's much easier for them to develop a hospital than to prevent people from going to hospitals. They cannot think of how we shall invest money so people will not go to the hospital. That's very difficult for politicians to think about. That's a too complicated idea. But the idea is at the end really to keep us healthier. And I think that we are moving forward and we are identifying more and more environmental factors, nutrient factors. But again, we are paying the price. Don't forget that the industrialized society is paying a price, and cancer is one of the prices that we are paying because we are air polluting, we are polluting our water resources, the rivers from the industry. Think about East Germany, for example. It's a case in study. Following the reunion of East Germany and West Germany, what the West German found was completely chaotic, old Russian type of an industry that didn't abide and didn't, with any consideration of the environment. And it takes them now billions and billions of euros. At the beginning it was the Deutsche Mark. And huge investment and revolutionized the whole. So we are identifying factors gradually. But you're absolutely right. I think that a major concern in universities and of governments will be to shift efforts to public and community health, which we are not doing. And I think we pinpointed it by accident, just talking about it during lunchtime. But I think that both questions, I'm sorry that I took that long time, but I think that you touched on extremely important problems, both problems, accessibility and prevention. So I don't have a solution, but I think that we could highlight some of the problems, bringing some examples.
Thank you, Professor. The gentleman over there, please.
Good afternoon, Doctor. My question might not be relevant scientifically, but I'm a layman. It just happened that I work with a company, they call it Biological Homeopathic Medical Corporation for the last 10 years. And I have seen the other side of medicine. They call it alternative, integrative, and natural medicine. Just before Holy Week, we invited a German doctor by the name of Dr. Landenberger. He's working with different scientists in Germany, like Dr. Thalberg, Dr. Koy, Dr. Heine, the one you showed from Heidelberg University. Their position is most of the cancer problems are nutritional deficiency. So they focus now on research, and they understand that for the next 20 years, the cancer is the prevalent disease of the world. So they are now positioning themselves like this. I have seen also cases, I'd like to inform you also that in the Philippines, there are a group of doctors practicing this type of medicine, especially homotoxicology from Germany, of which they treat cancer 1 and cancer 2 effectively. They have 99% success. They are based in Manila, Cebu, and also in Mindanao. My question is, I was amazed with your presentation with regards to control and processes. It means the garbage in and the garbage out. What happened to the protein if this not the garbage protein, as you said, there are about 10% dying, almost millions of these dying in our body. What happened if this does not come out in our body? Thus, this will mean also a possible community of cancer cells.
Okay, let me start with the first statement of yours, which is, I think, more important than the second one about homeopathic medicine and what we call alternative medicine. I think that it's very important to understand and to educate the public about it. People are desperate of conventional medicine, and I understand why. Because conventional medicine doesn't have answers. unfortunately. Science has not come yet with appropriate answers. Cancer is not defeated, and new diseases are coming, and we can do whatever we can do. Therefore, people are going to what we call alternative medicine. I don't say that alternative medicine doesn't work, but it has major disadvantage. And I'm not talking about homeopathic medicine. I'm talking about alternative medicine under one big umbrella, even including Chinese traditional medicine, CTM under, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM under it. The problem is that in the West, at least, and the West I include also countries in Asia, developing countries in Asia, developed countries in Asia, like Thailand, like Singapore, like the Philippines, like Japan. That's the West in many ways. There is a community, a scientific community, and the scientific community has a set of rules. And if they tell me that aspirin reduces fever, and there was a clinical experience done on 20,000 people, and indeed they show that aspirin can take fever, aspirin now becomes a fever reducer worldwide. The same for the immunization to human papillomavirus. They tried it. They took women that were infected with a disease, or they took a group of women that were not infected, and they showed that these women that were not infected, that were immunized, didn't get the infection compared to a control. In the scientific world, you know as good as I am that we developed a set of rules in which we accept or reject scientific assumptions. The problem with the homeopathic medicine and with alternative medicine, that it may work, I don't deny it because I don't know, but it didn't go through the scrutiny of the rules that scientists accept in the world in order to be accepted worldwide. It remained more of a magic type of a touch. When you tell me, and I must be blunt here, when you tell me that this group in Manila cures 99% of cancers, I can tell you one thing, I do not believe it. I simply do not believe it. If they will show me that they can take glioblastoma multiforme grade 4 of the brain, or pancreatic cancer, or cancer of the esophagus, or metastatic malignant melanoma, I will bring them 100 patients, and I bet you they will not cure even one. So we have to be very careful because we are dealing here with the sensitivity of the public. Because if you tell people that 99% are cured, we need to see the data. We need the data to be published by scientific journals, accepted by the New England Journal of Medicine, by Science by Nature. It needed to be taught in medical schools, and it needs to be the property of physicians worldwide. It cannot be that any medicine, let it be Chinese traditional medicine, homeopathic medicine, vitamin medicine, metal element, trace medicine, whatever, be the property of a group of physicians in Berlin, Manila, Paris, or London. Medicine is an international profession. It has problems. It has problems of accessibility, of pricing, of everything. But once a technique is accepted, it is accepted. And that's it. And the treatment for AIDS that is composed of protease inhibitors and so on and so forth is the current treatment of AIDS accepted by the world, presented all over the world. So we need to be very careful about it because we are handling human lives here, and we should be very careful not to disseminate rumors and misleading information. If Manila physicians can cure 99% of cancer patients, this should be the property of the entire world and the entire oncologic population and the entire population of oncologists worldwide. And that's my opinion, and I think that I'm talking for the patients that are dying of cancer all over the world. I mean, I'm not talking for myself, but quite frankly, I think that this is beyond our knowledge, and I don't believe the data. And about your second question, yes, the answer is yes. I don't know about population of cancer cells, but there are specific proteins, I can give you the names of, I can give you examples, that if not properly degraded, like MYC, for example, if MYC has a mutation in threonine residue 58, and it cannot be phosphorylated, and therefore it cannot be recognized by the ubiquitin system, it will accumulate and mutate cells and transform cells, and this will become cancerous. If beta-catenin, another protein, I'll just give you an example, will have a mutation in a phosphorylation site or in the scaffolding site, it will accumulate and will lead to colorectal carcinoma. Absolutely yes. It's not a garbage protein, I would say. Well, you can call it garbage. Garbage is just a term. It's a protein that has a cancerous activity that normally is degraded and kept at a very low level. So it's like the gas pedal, but the gas pedal under control, that all of a sudden is not degraded. The gas is like you are putting your leg on the gas pedal, and then once you take your leg off, the gas pedal doesn't follow you. It stays down, and the car just woof, accelerates. So you have no control on the gas pedal, which is disastrous for the car and for the driver. So yeah, the answer to your question is absolutely yes, but it has to be deconvoluted into specific proteins.
Doc, I referred to cancer 1 and cancer 2 that I was informed by the doctors that they have a very success rate. And I'm very happy for you to asking me that question because
no, it's very important.
I have to go back with them as you know, the Filipino doctors also want to protect the integrity of their practice. I wouldn't know how we can communicate to each other. Maybe I'll see you after this, so this group of doctors will try to do some communications with you with regards to their practice here. Thank you very much.
So I think that's all we have time for. So I know that there are many others who'd like to ask questions, but we do have a schedule to keep. And so we'd like to thank Professor Ciechanover for such a wonderful lecture. And perhaps, thank you. It's also fascinating to hear him talk about the miracle of life, especially coming from a scientist. And so before Professor Ciechanover leaves, may I ask Father Ben Nebres to join us here on stage to present our tokens of appreciation. The first token is a collection of the writings of Father Horacio de la Costa of the Society of Jesus, outstanding Filipino historian and writer. His writings give not only insights into the person of Father de la Costa, but also a glimpse of our Philippine history. And our second token we'd like to give Professor Ciechanover an Ateneo jacket to remember us by. Maybe he can use it for the Baguio trip. Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Ciechanover. Thank you very much, Father Nebres. So thank you once again for this wonderful, wonderful lecture and forum. Thank you. With this, we would like to thank you for joining us in this edition of Bridges, Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace. We also invite you to a simple reception outside the theater. Good afternoon.